Cooperstown doesn't deserve it. Part of me feels like, that's fine. You didn't want him in his lifetime. Well, you can't have him now. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Pete Rose knew one speed. He knew balls to the wall, and he knew trying to beat your ass. This is news to shoeless Joe Jackson, I can assure you, who died in 1951. Joe Jackson has been in that fucking cornfield for almost 75 years. It's a goddamn shame that he wasn't reinstated during his lifetime.
And now a man who savors a delicious slice of school cafeteria pizza. It's Ricky Cobb.
Oh yeah, and welcome you sweet bastards. It's a Wednesday morning in Chicago. I'm Ricky Cobb, and this is The Ricky Cobb Show. The only thing more delicious today than a slice of rectangular school cafeteria pizza is the news that Pete Rose has been reinstated by Commissioner Rob Manfred, the lifetime ban being ruled by the MLB Commish to be just that, a ban that only extends through the lifetime of the individual banned. And Pete passed away last September, sad occasion. And in the intervening 8 months, conversations have taken place between folks representing Pete Rose and Major League Baseball. That is something that was pretty commonly happening during his lifetime as well. And Commissioner Rob Manfred decreeing that Pete Rose is eligible for the Hall of Fame 35 plus years after Bart Giamatti banned him from baseball. And so the conversation naturally is going to turn immediately from that news into, will Pete Rose finally be elected into Cooperstown? And when will it happen, if it happens? Right out of the gate, let me tell you, the ship has sailed on him being voted on by the writers. The Baseball Writers Association of America will not decide this. His eligibility window to be voted upon by them has already passed long ago, about 20 years ago, in fact. So Pete Rose will go to something called the Classic Baseball Era Committee. We all have heard of the Veterans Committee, if you're a baseball fan. Well, a few years ago, they divided that Veterans Committee up into different eras. And the next time that the Pete Rose era of baseball is going to be voted upon by that particular committee is December of 2027. So the soonest that Pete Rose could be voted in, and this is a committee of 16 people composed of former players who are Hall of Famers. The last committee, I believe, had 5 Hall of Fame players on it out of the 16, and a Hall of Fame manager in Joe Torre. So you had 5 players, a manager, and then 10 others composed of journalists, writers, the guy from the Elias Sports Bureau, etc. So it's a mix. If they go into the smoke-filled room in December of 2027, and they probably don't smoke, but they used to be smoke-filled, believe me, and 12 out of 16 say yes, Pete Rose could be inducted into the Hall of Fame as soon as the summer of 2028. They meet every 3 years, so the next time that they would meet, if he doesn't make it, would be 2030, meaning that 2031 would be the next opportunity for Pete Rose to be elected into the Hall of Fame. We will obviously see how it plays out, but there are many who are cautioning jubilant Pete Rose fans to maybe pump the brakes a little bit, because just because he's eligible doesn't mean he's going in. Tony Kornheiser among them.
Pete Rose and Joe Jackson, shoeless Joe Jackson, are now eligible for the Hall of Fame. But Rob Manfred does not put you in the Hall of Fame. The baseball writers who are members put you in the Hall of Fame. Those baseball writers, as we know well, are guardians of the game. They take violations very seriously. Joe Jackson fixed games. Okay, Pete Rose bet on games as a manager of one team. That doesn't go away. You know who else is eligible for the Hall of Fame right now? Barry Bonds is eligible. Mark McGwire is eligible. Sammy Sosa, Roger Clemens, they're eligible. Are they getting in anytime soon? Doesn't look that way from the voting. As you know, Mike, I would put Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame. I would put his sins on the plaque and his accomplishments on the plaque. I agree that when your life is gone, it's okay to be eligible for something, but I do not see Pete Rose as a first ballot Hall of Fame. I just don't. I don't think it's going to happen because of the writers.
So there you go. But look, the reason that people got so down on Pete Rose, and we have heard so many people through the years say it, I think that the appetite for Pete Rose to be elected to the Hall of Fame has increased over the last 10 plus years. But I have heard so many people, I have been on the Rose train for a long time, reinstate him, put him in the Hall of Fame. The guy had 4,256 hits. We have no evidence whatsoever that he bet against the Cincinnati Reds, ever. When he was a manager, we have no evidence that that happened when he was a player. What he did, everybody in baseball knows that that's against the rule. Rule 21 it is, I believe. So everybody understands, and of course it's true that the integrity of the game rests upon knowing that you're having a fair competition and that there's nobody out there who could be interfering with that. I understand why that rule is such a big deal. I don't take it lightly. My position has been Pete Rose has suffered for a long time, and certainly by the end of his life, we're talking about 35 years that he twisted in the wind. Was he his own worst enemy? Yes, he was. Pretty much the entire way. Every time he opened his mouth, every time it seemed that he had some kind of momentum behind him, that there was a possibility, going way back to Bud Selig, considering it, Pete would always do something that made it more difficult for baseball to act on his behalf. So Pete really inflicted some of his own wounds. He certainly made it worse. And nobody made him gamble on baseball in the first place. But do we have any evidence that he did anything ever to throw a game? And there is none. And 35 years is a long time, and 35 years is too long, and it's a goddamn shame that he wasn't reinstated during his lifetime when he could have gone there and had his day and enjoyed a moment that would have meant the world to him, obviously. But now he only has a possibility of entering the Hall of Fame in death, and it feels like Major League Baseball is trying to have it both ways here a little bit. Rob Manfred, writing in a letter to attorney Jeffrey Linkov, who petitioned on behalf of the Rose family to have Pete removed from the permanently ineligible list, Manfred saying, obviously a person no longer with us cannot represent a threat to the integrity of the game. This is news to shoeless Joe Jackson, I can assure you, who died in 1951. Joe Jackson has been in that fucking cornfield for almost 75 years, my friends. He's been dead longer than he was alive, and nobody was moving mountains to make that motherfucker eligible, as near as I can tell. But he's eligible now, including 16 other people. 17 people in all have been reinstated with this ruling from Rob Manfred. Do we feel better? If you're a Pete Rose fan, are you happy? How much does it mean to you? And what would Pete Rose think? What does he think if he's looking down or looking up, depending upon what your opinion is? The only thing we have to go on is what he said during his lifetime. And he said this in the final months of his life. Let's take a listen.
I've come to the conclusion, and I hope I'm wrong, that I'll make the Hall of Fame after I die, which I totally disagree with, because the Hall of Fame is for two reasons: your fans and your family. It's for your family if you're here. It's for your fans if you're here, not if you're 10 feet under. What's the point? Because they'll make money over it? The Hall of Fame is for what you did on the field, not what you did off the field.
All right, that in fact was 10 days before Pete Rose's death. It's great public relations for Rob Manfred in Major League Baseball. You reinstate him. You're a hero. Rob Manfred, you did the right thing. I've been a pretty big critic of Rob Manfred. I used to think that I didn't like Bud Selig as a commissioner until I got a load of Rob Manfred. But I will say, given he had two options, which is the status quo or do this, I'm glad he did it. But at the same time, Major League Baseball kind of wanting their cake here and to be able to eat it too. You get to do the noble, virtuous thing. Pete Rose, we're welcoming him back. Well, no, you're not. You're not welcoming him back because he's dead. Pete talking about being 10 feet under. I guess you got to bury Pete 4 feet lower than everybody else, or else that motherfucker will hustle his way back to the Earth's surface. And that's why we loved him. The fact that you didn't see Pete Rose jogging to first base on a ground ball. You didn't see Pete Rose doing anything on a baseball field that wasn't with great urgency. He played the game the way that you want to teach children to play it. And whatever he did wrong off the field, and he did things wrong off the field. There's a whole litany of things that we can talk about when it comes to Pete Rose as far as off the field. He went to prison for not paying his taxes. He had some unsavory associates, shall we say. There are allegations about his personal romantic life that call into question his decision making. Pete Rose, in a lot of ways, was kind of an idiot off the field. But on the field, nobody busted their ass like this guy all the way up until he was in his mid-40s. He was playing as hard at age 45 as he was as a rookie. And I think that there's something there about that strikes a chord with the average American. We appreciate the fact that this guy showed up and gave everything he had to entertain us, and he gave everything he had to try to win. And that's why I don't believe he ever wagered against the Cincinnati Reds, because Pete Rose knew one speed. He knew balls to the wall, and he knew trying to beat your ass. That's the whole reason he loved gambling in the first place, is this motherfucker loves to win so much, and he's hyper competitive. And what's he going to do with his competitive urges when he doesn't have baseball to play? He didn't know what to do with his competitive urges when he did have baseball. I say, yes, imperfect person, absolutely. Did he go against baseball's most sacred rule? Yes, he did. But look at this tweet. This tweet pretty much sums up my position on the matter for a long time. Pete Rose may be an asshole. And he kind of was. Look, my daughter met him one time. I met him once at a card show. Shook his hand. He winked at my daughter. She still talks about that. Pete Rose was also a very gregarious, likable guy. Nobody held court like Pete Rose. He did like people. You couldn't be out there doing what he was doing. Baseballs are worth more if they're not signed by Pete Rose at this point in time. Everybody and their mother has a Pete Rose autographed baseball, including myself, because he was out there. Yeah, he was making money. He was hustling. He was Charlie Hustle on the field and off. But is the world really a better place without him in the Hall of Fame? As I said not long ago, I think 35 years of public ridicule and twisting in the wind is a sufficient penalty. He's not Hitler. He was never Hitler. Let's get over ourselves and put Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame, the most prolific hitter that the game has ever known. Cooperstown doesn't deserve him. Part of me feels like, that's fine. You didn't want him in his lifetime. Well, you can't have him now. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You want to have a big Pete Rose celebration? Even the way that this is rolled out, Ron, hits me funny, because the Reds are honoring Rose with a celebration tonight at Great American Ballpark. All fans in attendance are getting a Pete Rose replica jersey. They're having a pregame ceremony. Some of his former teammates are going to be there. And it's great to honor Pete Rose, but it's just interesting that Major League Baseball rolls this out. They're celebrating him in Cincinnati. And now suddenly it's like it's okay to be a Pete Rose fan who believes that he should be in the Hall of Fame. Just because he died, you're going to change your opinion on this matter? what was the purpose of the penalty? Was it truly just to make him suffer? Was it just cruelty? Was it just to deny him until he died? Because if what he did is so fucking bad, which is what we've been told all along, so bad that he can't be in there. If it's that fucking bad, why is it okay for him to be eligible now? Maybe it wasn't that bad before he died. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program my guest today. He is the voice of baseball at ESPN for over 30 years, one of the finest to ever do it. He is the great Karl Ravech. Karl, how are you?
Good, Ricky. How you been, man?
I've been good, man. A pleasure to have you back on the show. What was your reaction when you got the word that Pete Rose has been reinstated?
Surprised is my reaction. I have known the former commissioners prior to Rob Manfred. I don't believe this was something that they would have done. So I think, I was taken aback. I knew it was something that he was giving consideration to. I know that there had been personal appeals, in-person appeals from families and lawyers to get him to be off or taken off a permanently ineligible ban list. So I was surprised, to be honest with you, Ricky, that was the decision he came to.
Is this a case, am I being cynical if I think that this is a case of Major League Baseball kind of wanting their cake and to be able to eat it too? Now that Pete is gone, we're going to welcome him back. It just seems like it was very expedient for me. Allegedly 4 months after the family petitioned him to get this edict, what is Major League Baseball's motivation here?
That's a question you'd have to ask the commissioner. I'm not sure. I mean, it seems more closely associated with a meeting he had with the president, Donald Trump, who made it quite clear he wanted to absolve Pete Rose and get him back into sort of a position where he would then be eligible for a committee to get him into the Hall of Fame. But that's really a question for him. Again, to me, I'm not sure what that motivation is. To me, permanently ineligible means just that. And the passing of Pete Rose doesn't necessarily change the dynamic for me. He was permanently ineligible. I look at the Hall of Fame, and this is such an individual, personal conversation, and your feelings about Rose and your feelings about the sport. For me, Pete Rose is in the Hall of Fame. If you go to Cooperstown, you will see the numbers, you'll see the bats, you'll hear about the records. You know that nobody in the history of the game has more hits than Pete Rose. If you're talking about putting a plaque up in the hall where all the other plaques are, that's a different story. And that's clearly what this paves the way for. Doesn't mean, Rick, that this is going to now green light him to get in. It's quite clear the players who are on these committees have made it clear that any stain on the game, whether it be steroids, and those guys got like 4 votes in the most recent committee. Gambling is another one. I mean, having grown up in clubhouses the last 30 years, remember walking into every one of them. And the top line is, in a sense, the commandment, thou shalt not bet on baseball. He violated it. He was then put on a permanently ineligible list. I don't know. I don't know the motivation. I don't know what changed. He and what he did as a player are Hall of Fame worthy, but he's in the Hall of Fame. We know Pete Rose's records and, again, his bats, etc., are there. You can see and read all about him.
Shoeless Joe Jackson going in too. I don't want Shoeless Joe to get buried in this. Everybody is talking about Pete. Obviously, Shoeless Joe, he's been dead since 1951. Karl, I thought it was kind of interesting. Manfred issuing, in the letter that he wrote to Rose's attorney, he said, in part, obviously a person no longer with us cannot represent a threat to the integrity of the game. Joe Jackson, 75 years he's been waiting. Do you have any thoughts on the Black Sox being reinstated as well.
Well, it's the same. Again, for me, Ricky, I don't understand the distinction alive or dead. Pete Rose is going to keep gambling on baseball. If Shoeless Joe were alive, what impact he has on the integrity of the game, the action of the person that has caused these decisions to be made have been done. The integrity of the game issue, to me, isn't something that has to do with whether the person's alive or dead. Shoeless Joe and his White Sox were complicit in throwing baseball games. You can never do that if you want to talk about integrity of the game. Whether he's alive or dead, that happened back on that 1919 team. Pete Rose gambled on baseball. That already happened. If Pete Rose gambled 50 more times, to me, it happened. And he knew the rules. He broke them. It doesn't matter whether that person is alive or dead or can cause further damage to the integrity of the game. For me, Ricky, I'm sorry, I don't see the distinction. Rose, and I think the other part of this too, just moving it forward from a player's perspective, you got to understand this conversation is, again, very, very personal, very independent. Everybody has an argument. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone looks at it through a different lens. Former players recognized the greatness of Pete Rose to stand in a batter's box and hit a baseball. He did it more frequently than anybody in the game. That alone deserves to be recognized by the Hall of Fame. He also broke the number one rule of Major League Baseball, which is do not gamble. I don't understand the distinction, but players will look at it and say, gosh, you're missing the point, Karl. He did something nobody else did. He hit the ball and put it in play and reached base more than anyone else in the history of the game. If that's not Hall of Fame worthy, I don't know what is. Easy to compartmentalize. I don't blame them for doing it. And as a player, I have all the respect in the world and understand what he accomplished is Hall of Fame worthy. It's in there. If you go to Cooperstown, you will see all about it. If there's a plaque, and I'm not telling anybody how to vote, if I were sitting in that room, I would have a hard time voting for Pete Rose to have a plaque. If they do go that way, I can understand their reasoning, and that plaque, I'm sure, will reflect his entire life, not just the 4,000 plus hits. That plaque will also say why it took him 40 years from being eligible to getting into the Hall of Fame. It has to mention gambling. It has to mention the other transgressions. It certainly has to focus on his playing career and Charlie Hustle, all of those things. But I'm not certain that I look at this announcement from Rob and shuffling now into the hands of these committees to make a decision. I thought the decision was made when Pete Rose was put on a permanently ineligible list.
Karl, the Classic Baseball Era Committee, which is the one that it appears would consider the merits of Rose, meets next in December of 2027. So right. 2028 would be the soonest possible. You got 16 people on that committee. The last time they met, it consisted of 5 Hall of Fame players, such as Eddie Murray and Ozzie Smith, I believe. Joe Torre was a part of it. And then you had an assortment of historians and writers. Just handicapping it, knowing what you know about what his contemporaries feel about him, what the opinions are of a lot of the mainstays in journalism in those roles. How hard do you think it's going to be for 12 out of 16 to go thumbs up on Pete Rose in 2027?
I think it will be very hard. But again, if it passes, I wouldn't be shocked. But you and I are having this conversation, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm assuming, like me, you can see the gray in all of this, where in that room, there will be players, former players who said, I don't care. And everybody's entitled to a second chance. And he served his time and the man is dead. Why do we need to stomp all over the grave? Let's afford us the opportunity to have this discussion. And there will be those that say, as a player, this guy's a Hall of Famer. You know the arguments from many who will say, as a person, there's a lot of folks in the Hall of Fame who were bigots and racists and did other things that would warrant their character to be judged such that they wouldn't be Hall of Famers. There are so many different types of limbs that come off of the trunk of this tree when it comes to it. I think it will be difficult based on if you're willing to parse steroids and gambling and race. If you want to put them all in a bucket, it feels like it'll be very hard because the players, most of them, look at the integrity of the game as the most important thing. And we're not getting into gambling and the fact that Major League Baseball, ESPN, others have aligned themselves with that. I just think you got to go back to the original decision. Once the guy's on a permanently ineligible list, there's a reason the word is permanent and it's ineligible. Clearly, the commissioner took him off of it, and you opened up Pandora's box for the committees. But the committees and the people on them have shown their tolerance for such transgressions are not great.
One more for you on the topic of Rose, Karl. I mean, you've obviously been closely connected in the game for decades now. It seemed that there were a couple of moments through the years where Pete might have had a little bit of wind at his sails towards the possibility of being reinstated in his lifetime. How close did that ever get? Because it always felt that when there was maybe a moment where you thought, well, perhaps the winds are shifting, it always seemed like Pete would do something that made it more difficult on himself.
Yeah, and maybe you're touching on part of the reason the commissioner made the decision he did. There was a great level of frustration from Rose advocates as well as his detractors about his inability to keep his mouth shut. He kept stepping in his own mess. There were times, and I think if you look back on the history of the steroid era, those that came out and acknowledged right away that, yep, I was part of it, seem to, in the minds of many, have gotten more of a pass than those that went into denial right away and went to Capitol Hill, and you could just tell they were squirming and it was uncomfortable. And I'm not going to answer those questions versus the ones that came out and said, yep, you're right. I got caught up in it like so many others, and I did it. They don't get discussed anymore like the Bonses and the McGuires and the Sosas. Part of that's because of the accomplishments those guys had, separate from others. But the ones that seemed to acknowledge it were different. In Rose's case, it felt like there was, to use a current term, an olive branch that might have been handed out if he were willing to acknowledge and say, yes, I screwed up terribly. I can't believe I did it. But it was always like one step forward, two steps back. And, Ricky, I sit in that booth every Sunday night with Eduardo Perez, who's I think Pete Rose may have been his godfather. I mean, they are family. So I'm sure if you ask Tony Perez and Eduardo Perez, this is a day that is well deserved because they knew him as a player and they also knew him as a person. And people have faults. People make mistakes. So a great day for one of my closest friends, Eduardo Perez. I don't share in the same elation. But I understand his feelings about it because, again, as a baseball player, he did things nobody else did. So it's a very gray, nuanced discussion, but it's one of those things which I think is why we celebrate this great game of baseball so much. People are so passionate about it. Like all of a sudden, this is front burner stuff. For a while it was quiet. Now the commissioner comes out and says that, and boom, we're right back focused, which is another reason I don't think it's a great day for baseball because we're talking about somebody that gambled on the sport.
All right, Karl, real quickly here, the game today, we're at about the quarter pole of this 2025 season. Aaron Boone ejected last night, only his second ejection of the season. I'm disappointed in Booney because he knows that I want him to chase down Bobby Cox, the record of 161 ejections. So we got to get Booney more in touch with his anger for him to have a chance to do that. But all kidding aside, Karl, Aaron Judge is having a potentially historic season. Can you talk a little bit about how great Aaron Judge is? Because we are in an era, as much as I bemoan the death of the complete game, and
yep,
we're getting close to the death of the quality start sometimes, it feels like, as well. Pitchers have never been nastier, and
right.
Aaron Judge is just putting up unbelievable numbers, some even suggesting he might be the greatest right-handed hitter of all time, at least peak value.
Right.
What do you think of the Yankees and Judge so far this season?
Yeah, well, I mean, what Judge is doing, and we have them Sunday night, so I appreciate the promo. We have the Mets and Yankees on Sunday night at 7 on ESPN in the first Subway Series. I've certainly heard the argument. The greatest right-handed hitter I ever saw was probably Albert Pujols. I think Manny Ramirez was like a hitting savant. I've heard David Cohen sit next to me and say, Manny baited me as a hitter. Like, he would look terrible on a few sliders. I'd think I could get him out with a slider, and then he hit it 7 miles. Clearly, Judge has moved himself into that category. He was always an elite power hitter. But here's just a couple of notes for you. One of 2 Yankees, 10 or more homers and a 400-plus batting average in the team's first 40 games. Mickey Mantle, 1956. Another 50-homer season would be his 4th, which would tie him with Sosa, McGuire, and, of course, Babe Ruth. He's going to challenge what a modern-day Fangraphs record of 14-7 by Ruth. He's on pace to shatter it, and it wouldn't be something that would go away with a bad week. He's on pace for WAR only achieved by Ruth 13+ 3 times. That's not going to stop. 2 of the best seasons by a right-handed with weighted runs created plus, more multi-home run games than any other player. The thing that's, I think, great about Judge this season, and this is not a one that baseball fans wouldn't necessarily see, but he has become far less vulnerable to a slider. There were times early in this guy's career where you knew that if a right-handed pitcher had a good slider, he was going to swing and miss at it. He's gotten so much more patient. He's gotten so much more disciplined. He's bigger than everybody else that plays this game. So to his credit, he works his ass off. It's paying off for him. Will he ever get the Barry Bonds treatment to be intentionally walked as many times? I don't think so, because Bonds got 1 pitch to hit, and he hit it out. Judge can be pitched to carefully. He's better right now and more challenging to pitch to, but it's kind of comedic, and they don't necessarily have the guys around him, which would warrant a team to pitch to him in the zone. You try to get him to chase. He's done a lot better at it, but we should not take for granted what this guy is doing. And I think sometimes, Ricky, we watched Mike Trout when he first came on, and you had to remind people, just take a breath and watch what this guy has done his first 3 years. And then all of a sudden he's been hurt, and now he's, his Hall of Fame career, because he doesn't have longevity. God forbid Aaron Judge, hurt himself. Just appreciate what his rise has been like and where he's at now, because you may not see another 6'7", 280-pound guy do what he's been doing. It is incredibly unique. And as we'll say Sunday night, it's like a comic book. He's comical. He's a bigger than life character.
Absolutely. Well said. He is the voice of baseball on ESPN and a fountain of wisdom. We appreciate you making time for us this morning, Karl. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to be with you, Ricky.
If you like what you saw on today's show, head over to OutKick.com/newsletters and sign up for Ricky Cobb's Rewind. We're going to have great stuff coming to you every 2 weeks via email. It's absolutely free, and you can stay on top of everything that we're doing on the program.